everyone, Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's in the Two, where it's our show where we review things in the world of television. Most times now we are reviewing shows on an episode-by-episode basis as they're currently on air. But sometimes we do these special seasonal reviews, whether they're spoiler-filled or spoiler-free. Just talking about the entirety of a season from start to finish and seeing what does it hold up. How does it tell from to a cohesive story? Because, telling an episode by episode is completely different from telling a whole season of television. You know, you might have amazing episodes, but maybe the story's just not fully structured the way it's meant to be, and that kind of creates a bit of a disparity with the overall the case of it. This even being more of a little bit of a different with this being broadcast television. Today we are reviewing the 7th season of The Rookie season 7. I am very first of all, it's a bit weird to talk about it again because again we are in the middle of season 7 of The Rookie. We just finished Rookie season 7. We're going into Rookie season 8. So the fact that these are the numbers that are presented to us is something that, again, me going way back to beginning season 2 with those episode reviews to now reviewing the end of season 7, talk about it in full. The fact that I've even seen it is it's crazy just how much time has passed and how young I was. I think the show started when I was 21, 20, and I'm 27 now, and I'm just damn, I'm getting old, and I'm yeah, I'm not as useful as I was back in the day. But no, just before I go any further, this is a spoiler-free review. We are not spoiling anything beyond the first episode of season 7. We are only being very loose in strokes, so that anyone who has yet to catch the full season of The Rookie, which is now all available on Hulu for your binging consumption, this is not the review for you. But however, if you are looking into just figuring out where does season 7 stand as in the larger scope of the Rookie universe, we had 6 great seasons, some of them being amazing. Where does season 7 line up to be? And just to go into in a brief, very broad stroke, nothing getting too specific just quite yet. I think season 7 is a great example of just how the writers and the cast are willing to kind of, manage to still kind of feel new in terms of having a new barrage of characters, as well as at the same time able to kind of continuously develop these new storylines, these new episode formats, to keep the longer term fans and still attracting new viewers as a result. This is a prime example of a show that is self-cognizant that, hey, we are in the 7th season. Hey, we should be grateful for the fact that we even lasted this long. There's not that many other season 7s out there at this current regard. So the fact that, we're here is, something to be celebrated, but as well as, we can't just keep doing the same old. Now, I mean, I wouldn't mind, but eventually there's only so much you can do. But the fact is that we're here, and they've managed to be able to, every episode almost came up with something completely new, completely different, allowing the cast, whether old or new, to kind of really play in this bubble and kind of, really push these characters to where they need to go next, whether some being minorly, some being majorly. Every character has gotten some bit of push forward into their stories, and that, we're seeing their progress because of it. And I think, and I've said this in every episode review when we were doing season 7, since the beginning of the year, where these characters you are feeling their journey, you are feeling their struggles, you are feeling what their wants, what their needs are, and it pushes the characters even forward as a result of it, and it's quite. It still amazes me of how fresh the show could still be able to feel going into a 7th season and being able to kind of still show everyone, whether it's on ABC or Hulu or anything else, hey, we're still willing to take those leaps, to take some new changes, and to be able to kind of, develop that as a result. And I give the wholehearted credit to the team behind it for doing so. It's not easy to keep season 7 fresh. It really isn't. I think the last time I really talked about a season 7 was not even talked about, more witness. It wasn't that long ago. I watched there's plenty of other shows I've watched that binned up to season 7s, but the point of the being, maybe for me personally, season 7 is well worth the binge. If you got a full couple of weeks off, from work, you're on a staycation, you need a show, or you are a Rookie fan that was waiting for the whole season to be dropped, this is 100% a season worthy of continuing the Rookie name, continuing the storyline, making all the characters, feel important, bringing in new characters, even somehow surprising bringing in old characters, because we've reached that point in the Rookie where like we have now experienced OG returns, where like we're getting characters from season 1, season 2 back on board, which I'm like, the fact that we're in this deep in the show and we're still getting that is crazy. It's crazy to say the least about it. But, you know, that's all I got to really say about it from like a very, you know, minor, broad capacity. So going into it, again, this is spoiler free. We're not going further into anything beyond the first episode. So if you are concerned for that, you know, don't worry about it. Let's continue as may be. So when it came to season 7, you know, we all had our criticisms of season 6, mainly because, again, it was being developed as a post-strike season. They still want to do at least some batch of episodes into 2020 for Headspace, you know, regardless of how those were going to eventually line up to work out. You know, hey, 10 episodes is better than nothing. But there was some lacking stuff, like some obvious stuff that was left on the table for that season 7. For, you know, there was probably some retooling around of what they probably wanted to do from season 6 that probably got shuffled over into season 7 as a result. And, you know, no complaints there. You know, again, obviously they were working up against a wall. Again, I'm grateful to at least get 10 episodes of television for my favorite show in a year than nothing at all. You know, I think if they were have to wait until a full proper season to this year, I feel like that could have done some damage to the brand. Because, like, you know, again, we're in the age of, like, you know, television is meant to be more premium, and, you know, you are willing to wait an extra year longer for your TV show to come back. This is not the case right here. It's not the same. But no, when we got to Rookie season 7, there was a cadence for me when I was doing the predictions the year prior, that there was, again, I was being a little bit, you know, doom and gloomy. I admitted that, where season 7s traditionally mean cast renewals were coming up. That could either make or break a show. Sometimes if the actors demand too much and too many of the cast were demanding increases and the returnability of the show was just not quite there to justify it, then they cancel the show, or they do an abbreviated 8th season, or, you know, whatever the case might be. It does not coincide to continue with that premise. So for us going into season 7, again, you know, that was this time period where, like, most of these OG actors with their character, their time were up, the contracts were up, they were ready for renewals. And what does that mean on the surface of, like, you know, do they get more? Do they stay the same? Because, again, you know, if you're on a popular show on Hulu and ABC, like, you're going to want to demand a little bit more money, because, like, again, you know, it's your valuable time. And you can always, you know, in this age of social media, like, you know, you can always spin off to, like, hey, I'll just go to another platform, make a whole new show about me, and, you know, get the money that I want. I mean, I always use the whole Lauren Colan example from 2018, where she left The Walking Dead to get her pay increase. She got a show, and, you know, again, I'm not trying to speak ill will about an actress's, you know, decisions, or not, whether or not, you know, they did that for their own purpose. I completely respect that if that was their prerogative. But the show failed. They only got canceled after 1 season, and then she went back to Walking Dead, presumably for the same wages. That's just my estimation on it. And again, it must have been a sucky move, but then again, you know, that's just the nature of television, where, like, sometimes, you know, you can't always spin off to your own thing just because the money's not there. Sometimes you have to make those ill wages. And I think this cast was most likely very comfortable what they were making for it to get another season that easily. But to go back to it, like I said, season 7 could be with a sense of finality, that there could be certain things coming to a close for the event of maybe the show will not continue. And I feel like the premise for season 7 took my idea, threw it out the window. As it was morally, for me, it was about future thinking. That's kind of where my headspace was throughout season 7, where, like, you know, we are respecting the past, but we have to embrace the future. We have to embrace the changes, as multiple characters are going through that. We're like, they're acknowledging what has happened to their past, you know, whether it was good or bad, and what they need to do to improve themselves in the future. Because, again, being stuck in the past doesn't necessarily garnish you too much unless you're a nostalgia-based show. But most times than not, you know, you just have to keep, you know, figuring out what is next for me. What is something that I want to do that is beneficial for me as a person. And I think that as a result, it allowed them to make some of those heavy choices, you know, whether or not it was good for the people around them or not. And, you know, it's also about, again, like season 7, introducing 2 new rookies to the cast. That was also meant with, like, you know, okay, we're at that point where, like, the veteran cast is now having to, like, impart their wisdom, whether it was in character or not, to this next generation. Like, that could essentially be a fresh trove of new storylines for maybe 3, 4, 5 years to come. So how do you keep that all going? How do you keep pushing them to be the best of themselves and to be able to kind of, you know, have that sense of, you know, we're in good hands. We're very much in good hands. The future of where this is going to go. So to speak to the rest of season 7, that's where I viewed it, just in the sense of, like, everyone's kind of focused on just getting to where they need to go next. And I think as a result, it worked out for most of them, as, you know, they kind of had to, you know, wrestle with that and realize what they necessarily need to do next to improve their present so they can have a much better future. And I think overall, with that being the premise, as well as, you know, again, sometimes to have a better future, it means you have to do new things outside the box. And, you know, that, again, correlates to what I meant by season 7, having a trove of new ideas, keeping things fresh, keeping, you know, like, your feet in check of, like, okay, it's not necessarily as, you know, okay, we're just going to do this, and that, but no, let's really, like, let's kind of, you know, push the needle a little bit. Let's push a little bit. It doesn't do a crazy amount of things, but, like, you know, it does, like, there are episodes where, like, oh, okay, I'm actually surprised that was the direction they're going with, or that was the direction that the storyline was going with, you know. In terms of the connective nature, you know, when it comes to rookie seasons, you know, there's always, like, some sort of through line that we don't really expect, you know, again, without going too much into spoilers. There is a through line, but not what you expected, where, like, you know, it seems like once we have that one major story beat that kind of encompasses the first few episodes, then a new one gets introduced at the tail end of that kind of becomes the new focal point for the next few, and et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like that was just the noted notion we were kind of getting to when we were beginning the season to then when we ended the season, where, like, it felt like everything was kind of informing the other, whether it was for an episode or for a few episodes. It all made sense as a result, as well as the characters' larger journeys, whether it took the entire season to, or whether it took a partial season, regardless of the cadence might be, it made sense as a result to what they were trying to get to and accomplish by the end of it. Going into the characters specifically, we have our 2 new rookies, which we'll talk more about them when we get to the specific section, because they're not main cast members for the season, so we won't talk about them in that regard. But going into, I guess, from top and the bottom, you know, we have Sergeant Gray, who is now officially Lieutenant Gray. I think is that his new title, Lieutenant? I believe so. I could be wrong on that, but I believe it's Lieutenant. He got the new silver plates this season. Congrats to him. When it comes to his title this season, it didn't really do much, to be honest. There's not much I could say about it, to be honest. Where I guess I don't know what I was expecting, to be honest with you. You know, I will say when it comes to Gray this season, he's still the same old Gray, still making great banter, still being a great leader to these to his fellow officers, and that's really about it. There's not really much to say, you know. There's only I just bet he's just having a blast doing this, you know. Hey, look, when you have a stable gig, and, you know, you're just, you know, being the wisdomful people, having a couple of really powerful moments then and there, I think, you know, it keeps it going. And I feel that's just Ray again this season, where I'm the problem for it. Sadly, just to be a minor spoiler, we do not get the Garza episode team up I've been dying for so damn long. I've been calling for it for the last 3 years. I'll keep it going for another year. I don't know about this point. I really, really don't know. We kind of have to wait and see as we continue as a result of that. Then going into Juarez, you know, this being a pivotal season, because, again, you know, we started her story in season 5, obviously the previous season 6, but it's felt like a very long time since Juarez, you know, began a rookie, and how long it's been in the show time, that it's not really come to the curious, like, is she ever going to be to that next level of elevation for her FTO program journey? Are we ever going to see her elevate herself to that next level? And I will say, yes, there is a lot of major steps for her this season for her character as a result, in terms of her FTO program journey, as well as her own character journey, you know. Because it feels like at times when a character is in their FTO program, they're kind of just focusing morally on the program itself and nothing more. That's kind of all they've been, like, really doing, you know, to kind of dictate their storyline, you know, them, like, still learning the ropes, still learning, like, how to be a good officer, and at the same time, how are they going to be able to, like, fit into their future, like, beyond the role. And not to get too deep into Juarez, as she does make those advances in all of her in her personal and in her professional careers at long last, as we get to push her and kind of putting her in a very stable place with the others, where, like, whether or not, again, we've already had Aaron, who survived the FTO program, became a P2 alongside them, and then obviously he left. And that's another thing I should mention. Aaron is not part of season 7. He was officially let go after season 6. There just wasn't enough cadence and story for him. And I feel like even when I don't remember my predictions video from season 7 that often, but if I do remember my comments from that, I was a little hesitant on where Aaron could go in season 7. I was thinking of, like, just crafting a whole new storyline for him, whether it was going to be romantically or back to his family or something of the sort. Like, I was kind of limited in my movements of, like, what would I want to see him do next. And so him being kind of, like, moved adjacently to another precinct and everything, like, it may suck because you spent years with the character. You had hopes that he can grow and really bond with the group, but it didn't really come as made, to be honest with you. And that's no disrespect to the actor, that's no disrespect for that. It's just sometimes you have these ensemble casts, and sometimes you got to make these big choices to really keep things situated and keep them trucking along as a result of things. But no, when it comes to Juarez, yeah, she definitely she continued herself properly, was finally able to manage those peak points that she's been waiting on for so long now, and we as the viewers were like, finally she kind of, like, was able to, like, firmly put herself as, like, she is part of this team properly, and I think that was a really good thing as a result of it. Moving over to Wesley, where I have said this before in season 6, Wesley kind of started to feel like, we were finding reasons to have him pop up on things, as we didn't really develop much of a storyline last season. Because, again, with the pandemic, or not the pandemic, but the strikes and everything, there wasn't the episode order to really give everyone their true proper dues. And Wesley being kind of really far removed from the main principal setting, it just wasn't something that was, coming up as often. So for season 7, I was kind of hoping, like, we get those, like, something meaty for him to do. And I will say they do. They do in the beginning. I don't think it's something that really takes up the whole season. It is something that kind of, it actually makes us, the viewers, question a little bit, just because of the framing devices and just how everything seems to work out. But, Wesley this season, I can relate to him a little bit. I can relate to him a little bit on certain aspects. I think that kind of, empowered not only his character for his own decision making, but at the same time for his own relationship with Lopez as a result. Because, again, it's been too much of a honeymoon streak for some certain people. Again, I'm not trying to blame too much on season 6 with the whole strike and everything, but we were kind of left to, like, work in those pieces as a result. Then going into our fellow detectives, Lopez and Harper, starting with Lopez connecting with Wesley. But I will say, to be frank with you, I think if there's any character in season 7 they probably got a bit of the short end of the stick, it would probably be Lopez. Like, on top of my head, I really can't think of anything, even from a spoiler-free capacity, that can really say, that really would trigger, a major storyline for her. It doesn't really come up. I will say, to be broad strokes, she is part of everything else going on. She does have a say in Wesley's stuff that's happening with her. Obviously, she's still having, her moments of, like, assisting the main P2 officers and doing what they're doing. But other than that, I can't really think of a big moment, even if I can, like, vaguely describe it. I can't really think of it. And as a result, it doesn't hurt her character. I will say that by the time you end season 7, I think you end her in a good place that, like, gives her, like, okay, you may see you've seen a little bit less focus on her this season, like, in terms of, like, in a true character lens. But when we come back for season 8, that's gonna be the flip side of it. So I do at least appreciate that she is going to get that as a result. But here, you do see, like, a little less of a little underutilizing of that sort. Where to Harper, she got a huge boost this season, where, again, with everything last season going on, and that's going to be something I'm going to mention a lot of times, that there wasn't enough placement to give everyone something really meaty to work on. There had to be some sort of core storyline to kind of keep something in focus and in check. And, Harper, again, being similar to Lopez in that situation, where, like, she was in a honeymoon period, where, like, nothing was happening, everything was fine with her personal life, she was just mainly doing things as dictated by the larger story. This season, however, she does get into a fair amount of, of challenges, finally, where, like, she has some rocky developments on her personal front, and then, obviously, her finally getting somewhat of her own rival, I'll say that much, from a crime adversary portion, and I think that came as powerful as may be for that one. And, I think that really tested Harper, especially the actress's Mia Cox's acting ability. There was an episode in the second half of the season where I'm like, yes, they really pushed the character to a new limit. And I think that made it more of her journey and her story we've been watching so far as very deserving to watch as we were getting to those points and as we were seeing those episodes unfold for her. I won't give too much away, but yeah, there's still definitely some stuff that they set her up here that I don't quite think is done yet, and I think that will still keep her character as well as her relationship, let's say that much, on its expected toes as we hopefully when we pick that up in season 8. But that was very very nice to actually give her something of that nature. They hear a lot to do this season, so that was appreciative. Moving on to, I believe, I'm trying to remember who I haven't talked about yet. I think after that it's time for the big one, the Chenford. Yeah, so we the question of the may be, does Chenford get back together this season? I cannot answer that because that is a spoiler related question. But I will say, it's what I said when we were at that moment in season 6. Trust the writers. I do. I do. It's not because I am a Chenford hater. I'm not. I'm just saying that, y'all got your moments in season 5. And now you kind of have to, this is all part of development. Not every relationship is as easy as, you assume you get together and then that's it. No, every relationship has problems. Obviously, of course, people will most likely say, oh, but then why doesn't Nolan have those problems? Or why doesn't Lopez or Harper have those problems? I'm like, I understand that, but at the end of the day, you kind of have to give someone. And, like, I mean, the way the tackle of the season was, again, I will say communication. I've always said this before in multiple of my reviews and content. Communication is key for any relationship to work. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least if you talk to your partner throughout, at least understanding what's on their mind or the fundamentals that you need to talk about, that could alleviate some of your issues moving into things. But on the retrospect with this, that's not meant to give too much away, but like that's kind of like where I think a good portion of this season for them is focusing on. Where it's a lot of like, back and forth, so to speak. And we'll leave it at that. But, Bradford is more focused on, I will say he has turned a bit of a shade. If you really look back on, season 1 Bradford to now, obviously there is a change. And it's mostly becomes to Chen. At the end of season 6, he was going to go for therapy, really kind of dig into the deep heart of the matter, considering of all the trauma he had experienced growing up from his father, to now where he is going to go into things now with sort of where he wants to be a better man, especially not just for himself, but of course to be a much better partner for Chen should he get that opportunity to rekindle that. And that and that kind of put more into test with his new rookie this season with Miles, where it was apparent from the get-go that these two, it's a very Bradford always said that he adjusts to his boots on what they're lacking, and with Miles coming from like a previous PD experience before, having to kind of wrangle that in for an LA perspective, it does give Bradford a bit more of a weird take. Like does he train him like a traditional boot, or like trying to make him more open-minded, but at the same time the way he treats Miles, it's not as bad as when he was with Chen. This seems to be one where hopefully he can say this will be his proper full boot since Chen. He did have another one assigned to him, but he never got terribly far. And then he's touched a little bit on Thorson and Juarez's training, but other than that, he hasn't really had a full on boot since Chen. So it's night and day the difference. It's still the same Bradford we know and love. Don't get me wrong on that, but he very much takes it a bit differently, and he's more open as a result. And I think that kind of it showcases his improvement, that he could still maintain his still gun-ho strict attitude, but still is able to have those moments of like, okay, I'm listening. I'm not trying to make a Frasier reference whatsoever. And then going to Chen, where, yeah, I've said this before the last couple of years, Chen has really taken a lot of the short sticks in terms of, like, her development. After gaining her P2 status, we haven't really seen much of that. She did the undercover program for a bit back in season 4 to 5, but after that, we haven't really seen much of a movement on that front. She's kind of stayed there, trying out the detective's exam last year. That didn't really work out for her favor, and, this year it's kind of, always been like, where can she go from here? And yeah, in that first episode, she kind of becomes a temporary TO, which is not what she wants, but it's just something that, okay, at least for the moment, it's like kind of blimping an eye to the higher ups, like, hey, she's a go getter, she's willing to, like, take on the extra workload when needed. Again, even though this is not what she wants, she definitely has to make those tough sacrifices to get where she wants to in her career, and that's something she's kind of wrestling with. Or like, yeah, there's a bit of, like, the underlining where, like, yeah, she does still have feelings for Bradford, but at the same loop, it's like, well, she also kind of considers him a little bit differently. Of like, I can't just focus on someone else. I got to focus on me and my future, because, if y'all remember back in season 5 where she did the whole switch around so that Tim can go to Metro so that they could still date within the department without having much of a issue from the higher ups, that was a case where, like, she took her valuable time for Bradford to get him that big promotion. Obviously, it didn't work out so well, but still, it allowed them to work on that. So her making the moves this year, like, for herself, and I think that's put yourself first. Most times now, when it comes to, like, after a while, when it comes to, if you are in a consideration where relationships don't seem to be working that often, it becomes the questionability of, like, maybe it's something that I need to worry and focus on myself. Maybe it's that I'm not. And obviously you should never blame yourself fully for a breakup unless depending on the reason, but at the same time, it's like, you want to make sure that if you are having those moments, like, think of yourself first. Like, think of, like, what can you do to improve yourself? Not for someone else, but for you. And I think that's where the angle Chen took it, and it gives her the payoffs that, that she's been waiting for herself. Then to Nolan and Bailey, with that, with them, obviously Nolan being the, still the lead, the front phrase center child. When we last left off in season 6, they're trying to adopt a baby, and then now them going into the issue with, like, Bailey's ex-husband coming back into play, and Oscar out there as well. Kind of creates this, like, larger shadow on them, and finally, I think for the first time, in a while, there's no, there's a little bit of a rockiness in their paradise, and that's all I'll really say about it, considering the fact that her husband being out there on the lam, it kind of creates this looming presence against them, like, what kind of action will you do when your peace of mind is kind of at safety there. And I think that's kind of where no one kind of has to, like, really delve into that, him doing this for so many years, and it kind of creates, like, this unnecessary target on his back, whether it's him directly or for the people he loved. There's going to be a lot of times where, like, especially now with, like, him being married and him trying to, like, live this, like, peaceful, happy life, besides from work, like, it kind of creates that, like, that instability in him, like, it may not, it's coming from a good place, but it's not something that's really much healthy as a result. And I think that's something he has to, he works on this year, and as the fact that he and Bailey has to grow into their marriage and really, like, evolve the course of it, and figure out, like, really what needs to stick and what doesn't need to stick as a result. And honestly, when it comes to all the characters, like I said before, I think wholeheartedly the writers did a lot of great work, again, coming from a 10-episode season to 18 episodes, giving almost every character a moment in the spotlight this year. I think it really created that balance, really created that much more engageful season as a result. And then we had the return of the documentary style episode. That's one minor thing I can give away. We got a couple of new interesting facets, a couple of, cameos that, like, from the larger universe that, like, it's so great to see still on the mind, still definitely, still giving them credence on that. And in all honesty, like, to kind of, sum it up, Rookie Season 7 is a perfect example of, like, this is a show that is self-aware of the fact that we do not take our success for granted. We do not take the time we're still on the air for granted. We're still going to keep pushing forward and still being able to deliver a great season as a result, and still continuing to push that bar forward, whether it is for our old and new characters. And they're, after the season, it just showcases they're far from done. They could still keep going for a while longer, and I do hope so. And that this, reinvigorates all the fans, old and new, to keep watching and to keep staying tuned as a result. So for me, the Rookie Season 7 is well worth the binge. If you are a Rookie fanatic, 100% this is another great season for you to enjoy, another follow-up to continue after Season 6, if that wasn't really your cup of tea, but that was beyond their control. And as a result, I just am immensely more excited for Season 8 when we get back into that next year. So with all that being said, let me know down below, what did you think of the 7th season of The Rookie? Did you love it? Did you like it? Let me know down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. But I believe that's going to do it for me today, everyone. So if you're unaware, this has been What's the Two from ActionX. I'll give you my review on the 7th season of The Rookie. If you want to know, we're doing normally What's the Two besides our rookie reviews. Right now, we are currently doing nothing else at the moment, but you can always stay tuned for more cool reviews such as this one, as well as other sorts of videos from us as well. So please stay tuned for that. But again, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, like, favorite, share if you want to, ring that bell, and follow social media for more. But until we see each other again, thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe out there, be good to each other, and as always, peace out.